All right, guys. So here we go. Here we go. I don't know if you guys noticed, but I did post the study guide. What? Kinda. All right. So it's a little bit older, but anyway, that should help you when it comes to studying for the test. Don't expect a study guide every time. Like I said, when it comes to the bell ringers, I'm going to do my best with that to kind of, make that more of your study guide, what you put into it. I do have Quizlet posted as well and a Blooket. So Ms. O'Neill did that. So please look at that too to help you when it comes to studying. Um, yeah, real quick. So I do want to review a little bit about the commercial revolution. I want to talk about its impact because that's going to affect ultimately what we're going to talk about today, some negative impacts of this interconnection, this interaction. Oh boy. So yeah, it's going to get a little ugly here today with something that comes about. Oh no, anybody know? Jason? Plague. Yeah, the plague, good job. The Black Death. So we will talk about that today. I do gotta talk about the Hundred Years' War too, so there's a lot of information to go through here today. So if you are going then, you guys are going for your field trip, maybe if they left without you, I'm just joking. But, please check out the video. Again, tomorrow is gonna be our test. Same thing like last time. This time I'm gonna have a short answer though. So that should take a little bit more time for you guys and you shouldn't complete it within like, I don't know, 20 minutes or so. Should take the whole period. Um, iPads, you need your iPads. So you'll scan the QR code. Same thing will be a Google form, and that's how you'll complete it. Anyway, I'll give you guys some time here. Please work on the bell ringer. How about those Eagles? What the heck? What is it? It is unbelievable. Yeah. Ay, ay, ay. I can't believe it. I'm blaming Eli. That's what I'm saying. Yeah, at the end of the game, just pound the ball. Consider going to the motor safety course. They already left. Oh, see you later. Jenna, just see Miss Monster at some point. Probably when you get back or something. See ya. Yeah. Yeah. What in the first half or yeah. Like third and like seven. Yeah. I got some good work here. Good work. Okay. I hope not. All right. Okay. Okay. Is that better? Is that good? Or do you want to like that point? No. This is good. Okay. Peyton, do you want to go down after a bell ringer or is that okay? All right. All right, okay, so real quick here, guys, as we talked about the Crusades, right? So the Crusades were bad, were brutal, right? Were ugly, and a lot of you said, hey, it had a negative impact, right? When we think about the Crusades, the Holy Wars, it was all bad, but there was some good of it, right? So we did talk about the interconnection of Europe then, right? We mentioned about how these European kingdoms, right, these people make their way to the Middle East and bring back some of the goods, the valuables, the resources back to Europe. So there were some positives of the Crusades, right? There was a lot of interconnection. So much so that it then leads to this commercial revolution. All right, so tell me a little bit about it. What do you guys write down here at your bell ringer? What do you guys write? Anybody? What? No one? Kate, what do you write?
I have Europe changed the way trade went on, like trade routes had increased throughout Europe and later.
Okay, all right, yeah, so as you can see here with the Middle East, as these crusaders make their way to the Middle East, they're interacting with people they never interacted with before. And yeah, this ultimately will connect to Asia, right, way out to China, right, bring these resources to Europe, right? What else do we write? What else do we write? What about guilds? What about, I don't know, this interaction versus self-sufficiency? Jason, go ahead.
So some people started to actually make more money since they were being able to trade more efficiently. And they kind of give out the middle class more than it was already. So it's not just the upper and lower class, they're the middle class. They were lower class, like servants and people who didn't make any money, but they weren't like high class. They weren't these rich people, but they were up there. They weren't. I don't know how to explain this.
Was there a feudal system anymore?
No.
Was there a feudal pyramid?
No.
No, it all gets scrapped, right? It all gets pushed aside thanks to some of the extreme wealth that has flown through many of these major destinations, these trade ports, and then eventual cities in Europe. Right, so yeah, when you're looking at this time period of the commercial revolution and in this increased trade, people start to learn a craft, right? They start to learn an art, right? It might be a carpenter, it might be a blacksmith, whatever it might be. And all of a sudden, they start to realize that money goes a long way, right? Money does go a long way. And it's linked to the Catholic Church, to religion, and to the manor, right? Starts to change. And again, that idea of the feudal pyramid for protection, where you're maybe given a fief land and in return fealty, that all gets scrapped. Right now, people start to learn a trade, start to become good at a skill, and well, utilize that to make money. Okay. And this is already the start of what we talk about with this commercial revolution. I know capitalism isn't a term just yet, but that's kind of what we're seeing here with this free market starting to emerge, right? People are interacting in ways that they never done before. They're not just stuck on the manor anymore, dependent on what they grow and what they, let's say, mine or what type of resources they gather within their own manor. Now it's expanded past that. And again, we wouldn't have that without the Crusades. Does that make sense, guys? So when it comes to the manor, the self-sufficiency, you guys simulated it with that game, right? It all depended if you guys were gonna survive depending on your growth, depending on your harvest. Sometimes it was good harvest, sometimes it wasn't. Sometimes maybe you plundered a rival, your next door neighbor, your other manor. Sometimes you wouldn't. And in other cases here now, you can interact with one another. Now you can trade for goods and resources that you can't really find anywhere else, okay? Specifically, let's say not in your manor. So now you can trade, now you can interact in ways that you never did before. All right, anyway, real quick, so guilds, what are guilds? Wyatt, what are guilds?
A group of artisans, craftsmen, and other people
Yeah,
that put a price on goods and services.
yeah, good job, right? So as these guilds start to form, these are groups of these artisans, these carpenters, these blacksmiths, whatever you want to say, right? In other words, they're kind of like unions in a way, kinda. And what they do is establish standards, set prices, wages, right, for this craft. And when you look all throughout Europe, many cities have their own unique version of architecture, right? I know when we're talking about the Gothic and Romanesque, we really beat that up, I get it. But as you look at places all around Europe, you'll see a really unique way of this building, right, of this architecture. And it is interesting, right? It is beautiful. In any case, though, these guilds are the ones that are control the standards of how to make certain products and goods. And they're the ones that decide what the wages would be, let's say, for these workers and provide assistance to these workers, right? So these cities become unique depending on what they make. Italy especially is going to be this booming center, right? They're going to be the ones that have this massive influence to the rest of Europe. Like I said, they're gonna be like a funnel. They'll funnel all this insight, this rebirth, this renaissance, right, to the rest of Europe. And that's exactly where we're moving into next chapter, right? So you can see the link here, right? You can see how this binds together with the Renaissance, which we're gonna get to here soon. Anyway, when it comes to these businesses though, sometimes they need some money, right? Sometimes they need a loan. So banks start to emerge, right? Not just schools and universities, what we talked about with scholasticism, but banks and finances, right? Joint stock companies. Now all of a sudden, people are investing into certain companies to help expand the marketplace even more, which builds again these modern day cities in Europe. Anyway, so when it comes down to it, okay, these banks, these financial institutions, some of these families even that come from wealth become somewhat of uncrowned kings. What does it mean by uncrowned kings? Luna, what does it mean? Uncrowned kings, do they come from a line of royalty, like a bloodline? No, not really, no. They gain their power through their king, money, their wealth, right? So next chapter especially, pay attention to, next chapter, we're gonna talk about these uncrowned kings, the Medici family, right? And how they're pretty much controlling a lot of the finances, the resources, the materials that are grown up and produced in Italy. And then they can spend it on other things. Maybe raise an army, who knows, right? So you can see these families become so powerful, so wealthy, that they even rival some of these monarchs, some of these kings, right? Hence the name uncrowned kings, which is pretty neat. All right, so yeah, Europe's gonna totally change during this time, thanks to the commercial revolution. One thing though, that kicked back, all right, so as you got all this interaction, well, some negatives though are, well, you got it. It's not just resources they're bringing back. It's not just, let's say, gold or silk or, I don't know, resources that will make them rich, but well, also some diseases too. Oh, geez. Okay. So as this interactive economy, this commercial revolution really booms, right, throughout Europe, the Middle East, and even connecting to Asia. Well, some unwanted, I guess you'd say, things come back too. And one being, you got it, the plague. Oh, gosh. All right, so we're gonna talk about the Hundred Years' War today. We're gonna talk about the plague. We're gonna start first with the plague, and then get to the Hundred Years' War. All right, so here we go, here we go. Joan of Arc, I'm sure you maybe heard of her before, right? So interesting, good stuff, good stuff. All right, so there you go, I'll give you some time. What's up? Oh yeah, go ahead. You guys make a pass or how's that work? Does she have a pass for you? What's that? Go ahead, I'll make one for you. Just check out the video then, okay? Uh, All right, okay, so with these terms here today, guys, we're gonna talk about the Hundred Years' War, its impact on Europe, right? The rivalries that are gonna be set between England and France. That's gonna last all the way up until World War One, right? So that's a long span of years where these two countries, these two European powers will literally hate each other. Right, anyway, Joan of Arc, we'll talk about Saint Joan of Arc here soon, okay, with the lesson today, this war, this conflict. And how she had a huge role and impact in it. At 19 years old, geez. All right, so pretty young, obviously, having a big role and utilizing religion to unite some of the French troops against the English. All right, the plague. You guys know a little bit about the plague, I'm sure already. So we'll dive into this, guys. Again, I usually focus tomorrow a little bit more on an assignment I have for the Black Death, but we're gonna move on, okay, because we have to have our test tomorrow. I won't assign it. So lucky you guys, right? Lucky you guys. Anyway, real quick. So Parliament, okay, we finished up with Parliament. We mentioned about how as this commercial revolution kicks off and extreme wealth is moving into Europe, well, now all of a sudden, some of these people, right, some of these business owners have more wealth, and that obviously means power. So some of the monarchs, the kings, actually had to give up some of their pride, right? Some of their power in order to establish a, I guess you could say, united front in a way, right? To make sure that there wasn't any civil wars or revolutions that kick off. And with England, they're going to go through a lot of these civil wars here soon. Anyway, with Parliament, like I mentioned, this is the elected body. At first, it wasn't quite like that, right? If you were up of a higher status or a wealth, then maybe you'd earn your way into the House of Lords, right? A lot of it clergy, as you can see, church officials. But maybe House of Commons, right? Maybe this lower class when it comes to the middle class people, again, these wealthy individuals. So again, Parliament starts to establish, which is, again, going to lead to this representative body. Today in England, Great Britain, right? Does the king really have much power? Does the king really have much power? Jason? No, more or less, he's just like a figurehead, right? Maybe it's just like for ceremony or tradition, right, of England dating way, way back for its nation's history. But for the most part, he doesn't really do anything. He might address the nation through, I don't know, let's say a pandemic, right? Queen Elizabeth II, who RIP just passed away not too long ago, she addressed the nation through COVID-19 and events like that. But for the most part, Parliament, their prime minister, would make decisions for the people. So again, changing things. All right, real quick. So I did have an assignment for you about the plague, but I'm just going to move past it just because we can get our test in tomorrow and move on. Anyway, with the Black Death, well, what brings us about? Like I said, with the Crusades, one nice thing, one positive is that we finally see maybe modernization throughout Europe, right? We start to see this interaction. We start to see people interacting with others that they never interacted with before. Right, again, the Roman Empire was massive, it was strong, but once that fell apart, well, people were just pretty much focused within their manor. They didn't go really far outside their manor at all. They're tied to it. They're self-sufficient inside that manor. Right, as things change though, again, as the Crusades kick off, people are traveling all across Europe. People are traveling all the way to the Middle East, right? Connecting these trade routes to Asia. As they're bringing these resources back, yeah, we see the positives of it, right? We see the boom, the economic boom. We see the marketplaces evolving into modern day, somewhat, right? Modern day cities that we see today, that we know today. But one thing that lingers around too, that comes with, is disease, right? Is sickness. Anyway, with the plague, the Black Death, right? There was a bacteria, Yersinia pestis it's called, that was found inside of fleas that got hitched onto these rats that would make their way from Asia, right? So it originated kind of like modern day China in a way, right? And linked their way back through these trade routes back to Europe, back to the Middle East. And these fleas would literally make their way and bite onto people, bite on other things, and this disease would spread pretty quick. This infection would spread pretty quick. Anyway, with the Black Death, right? This wiped out about 25 to 50. I know that's a big span. Yeah, I don't understand why it's a big span like that, but whenever you look it up, it's about 25 to 50 million people, right? So you think about it, a third, maybe even a half of the population of Europe wiped out from this disease. Again, the reasons for it is because you go from self-sufficiency, people are isolated to a certain manner, to all of a sudden, boom, expanding, connecting everybody all across Europe and the Middle East and Asia. So anyway, this spreads pretty darn quick, and well, again, death falls with. It was so bad that, people tried to isolate the best that they could, but again, with health practices, especially back then, there's not much you can do. It's not like you can see these germs as bacteria, right? It's microscopic. So yeah, they didn't have the technology to kind of fight it, right? And anyway, one way they tried to fight it, well, let's just talk a little bit about the ailments. What would you see? A lot of times with people that would have the plague, their fingernails would start to turn black, right? Their feet, right? Their toes would even start to turn black, right? It would carry up to their fingers, even parts of their hands. And they start to get these boobles, right? They call them buboes or boobles, right? That would poke up out of their skin. As you see in the top right-hand corner, a lot of times you see it on their neck, right? Travel points, right? As blood would flow, right? That's where a lot of times you'd see it. Their lymph nodes, right, would bubble up quite like that. Okay, they call them buboes. Anyway, you'd even see them in the armpits, okay? But they look like almost like gross, rotten, hard-boiled eggs. And yeah, they would pus. Yeah, they would stink. It would be disgusting. It'd be gross. It's like, what do you do to solve it? And yeah, it would be very, very painful. One way they try to solve it, well, they'd have these plague doctors run around and try to do their best to alleviate the stress and the disease, the sickness from the people. So the plague doctor would wear kind of this mask. A lot of people back in the day thought, oh, you know what? They wore this to try to scare off the disease, scare off the sickness. No, not really. Anybody know what they would put in the beak of this mask? Ben? Herbs. Yeah. Herbs, spices, right? Cinnamon even, right? Crazy stuff. And this was a way to try to mask or prevent this disease from getting into people's, obviously nostrils, you name it, and a way to try to prevent it from spreading. And looking back at it, it's kind of a good idea, kinda, right? Did it totally prevent it now? It also wear these massive robes, right? And these massive robes would kind of be like I don't say like a rubber material because they didn't really have that, but it would be spread with like an oil, like a slick, different type of oil. And this would be again to try to prevent this disease, this sickness from getting onto them. It oftentimes go with a poker, and they go to these bubbles, these buboes, right, and try to poke the pus, right, try to pop them off their skin. And the goal was to try to alleviate again the stress of this disease, thinking that it will maybe just leak out, right? Maybe it'll just leak out of their body and just be gone. Who knows? Obviously, that didn't work. Right, again, when it comes to healthcare practices, way back in the day, it just wasn't something, again, that worked very well. And this disease just wiped out, again, a quarter, right, a third, some people even say a half of the population all throughout Europe. So yeah, you can see it, fleas on the rats carrying this bacteria, Yersinia pestis, and just wiping out a lot of the populations. So anyway, what happens? Well, all of a sudden people start to question. They're like, oh, well, how's this happening? Why is God punishing us with this disease, right? Why is this occurring? So people start to actually see somewhat of a divide from religion, from the church, right? From the Pope. They're like, you know what? If God really hated us, right, we had to do something wrong. Well, what did we do wrong? I don't know. So some people start to actually move away from religion so as it is. And kind of, you can see that connection when we talk about the Renaissance, right? This new humanistic approach to education. Anyway, a lot of times too, when it comes to the Pope, right, the Pope would have to try to answer these questions. So he would blame different types of religions, different types of rivals, right? So obviously the Islamic Muslims, sure. He'd also blame Jews, geez. And it came to a point where a lot of these crusades would actually go and attack other rival religions like the Jews. And it'd be a mass genocide, a mass murder of these people. So yeah, brought on a lot of craziness for sure. Also, this wasn't just the only wave of the Black Death, right? There's multiple waves of it. There's one later in the 1600s, one in the 1800s, right? So there's a lot of these that actually took place. Audrina, you got that?
Yeah.
Okay, all right, geez, I thought you were dozing off there. Anyway, so when it comes to the Black Death, right, the plague, it was brutal, and it took out, again, a massive portion of the population. Well, what happens then too? Well, one thing is that people can rise to these social levels that they never saw before, right? People that survive this plague, well, chances are you might see them actually earn a living, and well, when it decrease within production, let's say these farmers, right? They're going to be paid a little bit more money because let's face it, there's not that many people out there to produce these goods anymore. So some peasants that might have survived, well, start to see them rise and elevate. in certain areas. And again, that fuel system now definitely gets kicked to the curb. All right, so again, I wanted to give you this assignment, explains the plague a little bit more in detail, but you guys get the gist. Last thing here, guys, when it comes to the 100 Years' War. So one thing I wanted to mention is that these kingdoms, right, these countries started to form like we know today. And dating back to the Normans, right, the Normans, when they took over England, you guys remember William the Conqueror? Yeah, the Doomsday Book, good stuff. Well, they still had some land in France, right? They still had land on continental Europe. And the idea here with this war is that England didn't want to stop there. They thought, you know what, we can expand our empire even further. So this war literally broke out, a lot of it based off of England's right to this land in France. And because France, well, they didn't have really an heir to the throne. So the French king, which you guys don't need to know the names, I'm kind of giving you just a rundown of it. The French king was like, you know what, we don't really have a right heir to the throne. We'll just appoint someone else, right? The king didn't have a son. So they appointed someone else of his family to be king. So in England, they're like, you know, well, we have some marriages here connecting to France. So technically, it should just fall under England, right? It should all just be one kingdom. Right? Obviously, France, right? The French king didn't want to give that up. And at one point, I know on one of the slides I showed you a picture of England's territorial gains within France. There's actually more land than France actually had within what we know of France today. So it's kind of shocking to see exactly how much land England actually acquired during that time under William the Conqueror, the Normans, and then expanding past that. Anyway, so again, the war occurred, a lot of it based off of land disputes, a lot of it based off of who's going to be the next heir to the throne, who's going to be the next king of France. So you can see where that kind of gets a little murky. Anyway, with the war, 100 Years' War, yeah, it lasts actually over 100 years. It lasts actually 116 years. Maybe an extra credit point, I don't know. So 116 years. So this lasts a little bit longer. Well, why did it last so long? Well, a lot of it based off of the Crusades, okay? So the Crusades didn't stop. And this would actually unite these two powers, these two countries for a short time to launch these Crusades to the Holy Land. So yeah, they even participate in it. They'd actually fight one another and say, you know what, hey, we actually got to do this crusade for the Pope. Let's do it quick. So they'd actually shake hands, go down, fight the crusade, come back, then start fighting again. It's unbelievable. Also, you got to imagine the plague, right? The plague's going to put anything on the sideline for a bit. So yeah, as people were getting killed, from this invisible enemy, right, from this bacterial infection, well, this puts the 100 Years' War on pause for certain years, which makes it last so darn long. All right, anyway, so with this war, what happens? Well, eventually, the French would do their best to actually push the British out of what we know of modern day France. So France wins, right? Again, it took so darn long and people died, thousands, millions of people died in these wars that spanned over so long. And again, the Black Death, the Crusades, it's kind of crazy. But eventually France would win it. And this would create a rivalry between the two kingdoms to eventually the two countries that would span all the way up until eventually World War I. When a new enemy comes around, it will be Germany. Jeez, okay. So we'll talk about that eventually down. Give me 1 second. Hello, Mr. Bowman. Yeah. Calvin, okay. All right, yes. Go ahead. All right, Blake, Calvin, end of the period, and you're supposed to go to the office, okay? All right, so with the 100 Years' War, last thing I want to mention. So there was a hero of it, Joan of Arc, right? So Joan of Arc, I'm sure you guys maybe heard of her before. Anyway, she was a peasant girl, right? But she was seen by these saints, right? She visualized it, dreamed of it, and how she needed to participate in the 100 Years' War. Anyway, through these visions she had, right, this tie to religion, she actually communicates with the King of France, Charles, at the time, and says, hey, I'm supposed to lead this, right? This is my mission here on earth. And the king, because let's face it, going up against England is no easy task. He says, okay, well, if God said it, then sure, yeah. The only thing, though, is that you got to appear to look like a man, right? Because at the time, women dressing in men's clothes was viewed as heresy, right? A sign against the church. So you'd be killed, right? Anyway, for her, Joan of Arc, she does successfully. A lot of people just say it's just sheer luck, but she didn't have any military knowledge, let's face it. She was a 16-year-old girl. Anyway, she goes in and actually protects Orleans, right? Or however the French pronounce it, but let's just say it's Orleans, right? So you guys know New Orleans, right? When you think of Louisiana, right? It's named after this, sure. Okay, anyway, Orleans. So with that city, you can see it's very close to Paris. Anyway, Joan of Arc leading this French military actually takes back Orleans, right? Takes back Orleans and protects it from the British and actually pushes out some of these British forces, these English troops. So much so that eventually France would be liberated from these British forces and this British movement within France. Well, what happens to Joan of Arc? Well, unfortunately, she eventually gets captured. She gets taken. She's actually wounded in the Battle of Orleans. She was hit by an arrow right through the shoulder. She almost died, but she lived. And she was later taken then by the British in another battle towards Paris. And she was burned at the stake. Darn, geez, okay. So the British said, listen, this girl is dressed up as a man. This is a heretic person against the church. We're going to burn her at the stake. So they burned her at the stake. Well, they decided after she died, well, that's not enough. So they burned her 2 more times at the stake. Her partners. It's like, what is going on? We have to make sure she was dead. Make sure she didn't come back. But it's an influential story, so much so, by the year 1920. So, yeah, I know that's over 100 years ago now, but by 1920, they crown her as a saint. They actually make a huge, massive ceremony for her, which they make her a saint, which is pretty cool. All right, so 100 Years War, good stuff. Go, real quick story before you guys go. This is incredible. So you guys know where the middle finger comes about? Oh boy, I better watch it recording. So with this war, the English were skilled archers, okay? Skilled archers. The French would capture them, and obviously to pull back an arrow, you need your middle finger. So the French, whenever they would capture some of these British soldiers, these archers, they cut their middle finger off. So the British, they try to taunt the French that they, let's say, didn't get captured, and say, hey, you missed this one, and that's where the middle finger comes from. Pretty interesting story. It dates back to the 100 Years War. It is interesting. All right, again, guys, make sure you know the French win. The French win, and if it's a rivalry between the two, and we'll talk about that rivalry throughout the course of the year. A lot of wars will stem from this. A lot between the two towers. The middle finger, what? Unbelievable! Gosh, I hope I don't get taken down on YouTube. Don't do it later. Please don't. All right, see you. Take care.